What's going on, you guys? We are back for another Legacy GT video. I told you when we started this build series that we were gonna keep this thing rolling, and I'm doing my best to get regularly scheduled content out to you guys. So if you're loving it, drop a comment down below and let me know. But today, we are finally putting parts back on the car, and we're gonna begin with the STI power steering rack. So we've got a brand new 2015 plus STI power steering rack from Subaru that we're gonna be putting on this car. Let me get it out of the box here, and I'll tell you some of the advantages of why this is an upgrade compared to what comes on the Legacy stock. Okay, so like I was saying, this is a 2015 and up STI power steering rack. And the reason this is an upgrade from the Legacy GT one is because it has a quicker turning radius. This has a 13:1 turning radius versus the 15:1 that you find on the Legacy GT and Spec B, and the 17:1 on the Outback. So it should be a much quicker steering setup. We also got the STI Solid U-Joint compared to the dampened one that comes in the Legacy GT. So this is just gonna be a much more solid feeling steering setup. And then right out of the box, we've got a few upgrades that we're gonna do to it as well. So like I mentioned, we've got this Cusco brace that goes here. We've got all new Whiteline bushings to go throughout the rack. So there's the one that wraps around the core of it, and then the bushings in here as well. We're gonna get those upgraded. And it comes with a new brace, which is sweet because I've got all new hardware as well. This thing's gonna look brand new. Now there is one more thing we need to do to the steering rack to make it work in the Legacy GT. Because the STI has a wider track width overall, we need to trim down these tie rods a little bit by just a couple millimeters on each side. And we're also gonna be swapping this tie rod end for the Whiteline one that's on my old steering rack. We'll be using that here instead. So right out of the box, I'm stoked on this Whiteline kit because it literally comes with a kit to use to get these stock ones out of here. I was already thinking I was gonna have to get the press out and start working on that. Nope, Whiteline makes it super easy for you, so that's awesome. It also comes with two different size bushings for the rack because rack size does vary, so you can get that dialed in and make sure that it's perfect. So I think what I'm gonna do here is just start disassembling what I don't need off of this, like take this bracket off that's just rubber banded on, get the tie rod ends off, and look at getting these bushings out of here so that we can start putting our new parts into the rack. So that was a super quick upgrade. So we've got the new Whiteline bushings in the steering rack. You can see the Cusco brace will go like that. Looks super sick. And we just gotta swap this bushing out here for the appropriate size one of those. So I'm gonna start working on getting the tie rod ends off and looking at cutting these down like we need to, so we can actually look at getting the rack installed into the car. Okay, so if you're doing this at home, you need an M14 by 1.5 nut, and you're gonna thread it on here, and you're gonna use this as your guide of where you're gonna cut the tie rod down. So we want 3 to 4 threads showing, and then we'll set that, bring this up to the back of it, and use this hacksaw here to trim them down. I have no idea what possessed me to try to just cut that left-handed. I've never done anything left-handed in my life. So flip the rack around, take 2. Okay, that blade is duller than shit because I just worked up a sweat getting this cut. So we're probably gonna wait to do the other side until tomorrow when I can get a new blade because that was brutal. But I do wanna get the tie rod ends off of the other steering rack, put it on here, make sure it works. We're obviously gonna clean those up, so let's go ahead and get those off. So I finally got the tie rod ends off. They're in decent shape, but this one here just kind of has a little start of a rip in it, and I would love to just replace these. So I'm gonna reach out to Whiteline and see if I can buy just those, because I did buy just new ball joints, so I'm almost certain that I can. But we gotta cut this one down, and then the rack is ready to go. We'll put the tie rod ends on and we can start working on getting this installed in the car. I'm gonna come back and get this installed in the car, obviously put the new U-joint in, all of that stuff, and we'll probably just put the tie rod ends on later because I'm gonna need to get them either like 2-day or overnighted or something to get them quick enough. All right, so back for day 2 to cut the other side. I picked up new blades from the hardware store, got one that is a little bit coarser, meant for harder metal like this. I believe it's steel. If I'm wrong, someone correct me in the comments, but this should be much easier. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this side cut and we'll start looking at getting this in the car. So we've got the tie rods both cut, and that new blade definitely didn't make it any easier, so I think this is just a hard piece to cut. I did end up ordering new Whiteline tie rod end links because the boots on these were a little bit shot, so once those come in, we'll get them all installed onto the tie rack and have the steering rack actually ready to go. Now the next thing we need to do is get the factory Legacy GT U-Joint uninstalled from here and get these power steering lines all cleaned up before we connect them to the new rack. Here's a side-by-side comparison of the dampened Legacy GT U-Joint versus the solid STI one. Now, I've read a lot online and people go back and forth about whether or not you'll actually notice a performance upgrade with this solid U-Joint, but to me it makes sense that if you have a solid piece versus a dampened piece, it's a more direct steering input with this STI model. Now, we're doing a lot of other upgrades to the car, so whether or not we'll actually feel this upgrade specifically, I don't know. But it was something I wanted to put on the car. It makes sense to do with the STI power steering rack. So we're gonna go ahead and get this installed on the car, and it'll be nice to have a nice new clean piece in there as well. So if you're doing this job at home, don't make the same mistake that I just made. You need to leave all of the mounting brackets down here on the subframe loose so you can get the U-joint connected up here. Otherwise, you're not gonna have enough room to move that back and forth and get it onto the steering shaft and the steering rack. So I've gone ahead and adjusted this, gotten it all on there and tightened down. That's ready to go. Now the last thing we need to do is get these power steering lines all connected to the rack and we'll be good to go. So at the sway bar end, I'm gonna work on a couple other things. We've got new ball joints to throw onto the front knuckles, so I'm gonna get those replaced. We've got those guys right here, so I'm gonna get them installed in the hubs, and then we're gonna look at getting the front sway bar installed in the car. All right, let me give you guys an update. A couple things have happened since last night. So, I went to install these bolts which hold the ball joint in here, and let's see if we can get to focus. The threading got a little bit messed up when it was going in there, which I didn't like. So we're gonna replace those. I went and got new ones today. I already installed one and just made sure that everything was working and that I wasn't gonna have damaged threads again. I went ahead and cleaned out the threads with a tap and then just put this in with anti-seize. So I'm gonna film doing this one here, and then I need to check the torque specs on these. Before we throw the brace back on over the sway bar, can we just take a moment to appreciate how good that yellow looks? I am so hyped. So if you haven't been following along, actually, I don't know if I've talked about it on YouTube. Yellow is the accent color we went with for the sway bars and the brakes as well. So it's kind of tied in throughout the car. That's a wrap on getting the STI steering rack into the Legacy GT, or at least as much as we can do today. Obviously, once we get the hubs back in the car, we'll have to connect the tie rod ends. But this thing's good to go. We got the sway bar all in. In the next video, we'll be working on getting all of our Whiteline bushings and Energy subframe bushings into the control arms and the subframes. All right, I've been having an absolute blast working on the Legacy. It's so cool to just kind of refresh this car and turn it into, you know, my dream vision for it right around the 10-year mark that I've owned it. I hope you guys are enjoying the build series as much as I am actually building the car. If you want to see more of the Legacy GT videos, I've put 2 videos up here on the screen. It really helps me if you check those out. If you're not already, hit that subscribe button and I will see you next time.